Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the second episode review for The Mandalorian. This has been an interesting adventure to try and look at this with the sight of what Disney's trying to create, what audiences it's trying to address, as well as ways that it could be improved upon. We're not going to do too much in the improvement section for this episode, but I do definitely want to dig into the implications of what is happening in each of these scenes. We have Rolling Chairs with us again. Greetings, Rolling Chairs. How you doing?
Hello. I'm doing good. Excited to be here.
For each of these reviews, it's really good to be able to have people who have kind of a lore background in multiple different areas. For me, I come at this primarily from the background of the prequels and the original trilogy. I have no understanding of the Clone Wars era. Nothing from Clone Wars, nothing from Rebels. That's where Rolling Chairs comes in. He brings that knowledge base of having seen those shows and actually having been a fan of that. For me, I'm fairly open-minded to try and look at this look at this show in terms of what audience is it serving, who is being left, kind of the main points that they can really benefit from, and I believe primarily this is targeted towards people who are fans of the TV shows, but at that same time, they are putting in stuff for those of us who are from an older version of Star Wars, George Lucas's Star Wars. And we're getting to see Disney trying to weave in elements for their story as well. And we're trying to see those three worlds come together, and we're trying to find a common ground. We might not always agree on things about this, but in the end, it's going to be probably better for everyone to be able to better understand the key aspects of this show, things that work out well, things that could be improved upon, and hopefully if Disney somehow were to actually stumble upon this, they would have like actionable ways to start to figure out how they can improve the story moving forward, if nothing else to give better clarity to viewers. So with that, we're going to be diving into this. We're going to start off with a brief recap of the episode, and then dive into scene by scene what happens in each of those scenes. So this is going to have spoilers. My apologies if you were wanting a spoiler-free review of this. It's just not possible for a show like this. So we're going to keep it fairly as neutral as possible. And so hopefully you'll still get to enjoy it. But for us to actually dig in and try and figure out ways that they could improve upon this, you really have to unveil a lot of what has transpired in the show already. Lastly, this is being streamed to two different sources. Right now, this is going out to Twitch. It's also going to YouTube. We are just getting the YouTube side up and running, so if anybody from the Twitch side wants to also be able to watch over there on YouTube, that will help out for the viewing hours. That is very crucial to being able to help that channel to grow. So without further ado, let us dive into this. Rolling Chairs, would you like to give us a brief recap of the entire episode? And I mean like really, really brief. What
Yep,
are the
I can do
main
that.
points?
So it starts out, Mando gets a droid to take to him with Mandalore. He gets the droid from a friend from the previous seasons. And then he goes to Mandalore with Grogu and this new droid. The droid is not capable of completing the mission, so Mando goes out and saves the droid. And in the process, discovers that the air is breathable and Mandalore is not cursed. And then he takes Grogu with him to go down into the mines, where he ends up being captured. And then Grogu comes to the rescue by bringing Bo-Katan to help save him. And then after that, Bo-Katan saves him, and then they go to the Living Waters. Very brief summary.
All right, excellent. For those who are not currently watching The Mandalore, This is building upon several seasons at this point, and not just the Mandalorian. It's building upon the Clone Wars. It's building upon Book of Fett. And so there's actually a lot of ground that has to be covered to kind of get up to speed. And so if you have any questions, be sure to mention them in the comments. We do have both sets of comments pulled up. While I would like to be able to address every comment as we typically do with the Twitch streams, it's just not going to be possible during these discussions when we have multiple chats going at the same time. And so if you have things that are directed towards the story, be sure to mention that you have a comment that you want to mention about the show itself. It can be something that you liked about it, something you didn't really like about it, ways you think it could have been improved upon. And if you're a part of the Discord community, you will have the ability to potentially come on and help out by giving us a little bit of feedback. And then you can be able to jump onto the call. We won't do that this time, but next time we will have that ability. And we're going to have like a proper process to make it easier for you to do that. So in this show, we have seen only snapshots of Mandalore at this point. We have heard about it. Characters have talked about it constantly, but we haven't actually stepped foot onto the planet. Now, in this episode, it finally happens. I was, just for kind of a first time experience for me to actually see anything that had to do with Mandalore, the planet, it was intriguing. I will say that. It was an intriguing planet, and they did do a good job with the design. But there were some other issues that we will address later on that I think they could have improved upon. But let's pull up the show itself. So in the show, we start off back on Tatooine, and they are having speeder races in the streets on Bunta Eve. Honestly, it was a fairly clever idea. They're adding culture to the planet of Tatooine. It's not just standard run-of-the-mill Tatooine that we've always seen. They're actually showing something different, and something that was honestly very believable for their world. They already have kind of questionable races that happen there on Tatooine, and so to have speeders in addition to that, not anything too shocking. But this scene was probably not the best one that they could have done. It could have been better. We're finding out that some people are having their their racing speeders sabotaged, and they are getting repaired for a substantial amount of cash, and unfortunately it is dealing with this mechanic who I've never really liked seeing on screen, and lo and behold, we're reintroduced to her. So she is quirky, definitely brings a lot of personality. Her character just rubs me the wrong way. What were your thoughts about this scene, Roland Shares?
I personally don't have anything against her character. I mean, they definitely try to use her character to like introduce some new like slang type words, which some of them are funny and hit, but some of them completely miss, and you're just like, why are you saying that? Why are you saying that? But I felt like I didn't have a huge problem with her doing the thing with kind of scamming a few dollars out of this dude. Not everyone's perfect in this Star Wars universe, and
Oh yeah.
But it was definitely a scummy thing to do. So I didn't really have anything liked or disliked for the most part, but I really did like, honestly, seeing the BD droid behind her. You have it in the picture that you have on screen right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my favorite droids in the Star Wars universe, and I wish Mando took that droid with him. But yeah,
now,
not too much.
Correction, you're referring to this one up here, not the pit droid.
Yeah, the little tiny one with the flashing lights. But yeah, right there.
Okay, there we go. That one right there.
The game. Yeah, it's a little cute little droid.
Hmm. What is the droid's purpose, by the way? I know all droids have like a base function that it's supposed to have, and so can you describe what the droid's typical function is supposed to be?
Well, in the Jedi Fallen Order, I'm pretty sure is where it's like really introduced, at least on screen. And there might be some comics and stuff or background stuff I'm not aware of, but it was really like uh, an adventure droid that's able to like travel through different terrains than like R2s are typically a pilot droid. This one's more like scanning environments and such stuff like that. Uh, and he helps the Jedi Cal Kestis with his adventures and searching through planets and stuff and fallen Jedi temples, stuff like that.
Wait.
Uh,
Go over that again. That last part.
he the droid like helps scan environments and it's able to go through different terrains and it helps Cal Kestis from the Jedi Fallen Order game. Uh, with his adventure of going through the remnants of the Jedi Order and such things like that. It's a very interesting droid, in my opinion.
Okay, that is actually interesting. I like that droid. Uh,
Mhm. It's a BD unit.
BD. I'm just pulling up right now. BD. Actually, it's
I
really
really wanted
clever. I
Mando to
like
take
it.
that.
Yeah, it's like,
Hmm.
why did Mando not take that one? For those who are about ready to see this next scene, well, think about last episode. Mando went out to try and get an assassin droid to be brought back to life to help go into the Mandalore caves and mines so he could be able to go in as well and they'd find out if the air is breathable. But right behind in this
Is
scene
this one?
is the droid that he needed. And he's not going to get that one. He's going to be given, honestly, one of the worst droids you could ever take, which is unfortunate. Because it's this droid right here. It's called R5. But it's an astromech. Disney, you are a bit tone deaf in your droid selections here. They want to get an astromech out there because that's going to be good for branding and whatnot. When they had a droid already at their disposal that they could have used. So just kind of ironic.
I think the
Um,
BD unit would have been perfect because it's very popular with fans as well, especially of the games and stuff. Like people love that droid, and I think people have been happy to see him, that little droid, and Grogu going on a little adventure. But whatever.
yeah, but that's also a lesser known droid. And in Disney's defense,
Mhm.
they look at something like that and think, well, which droid do you want to actually have out there? This one that only a few fans are going to be aware of, or this one which fans have been aware of since the very first Star Wars? Literally,
Mhm.
that droid's been around since the very first Star Wars. So when Disney's making their decisions, they want to push the thing that's the most nostalgia baiting. And
Yeah.
it's unfortunate. It could have been so much better if they think about the interesting scenarios that you could have had by introducing a brand new droid. You could have had all sorts of interesting quirks about it. And so,
I will say, I will say this though. Obviously, when you watch the whole episode, you find out that was just a clever way for them to get a pilot droid, like a droid that can pilot a ship, because Grogu needed a way to get to Bo-Katan, and he's not able to pilot a ship. And that droid in the back, the BD unit, isn't able piloting a ship either. So they needed a droid that was able to pilot a ship, and this is just their way of setting that up. At least the way I interpreted it. Like, that was their way of trying to get around it. So it was kind of annoying. Like they got that droid, and it literally just failed within 30 seconds. But you understand that they did it because Grogu needed a way to get to Bo-Katan so she could get to Mandalore.
All right. Should be good. Now muted. Should be good at this point.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. Yeah, the reason why I was curious is because suddenly I lost all audio, and I just wanted to make sure that something was there. All right, So here we go. Good to go. Again, my apologies, folks. Everything seems to be up and operational once again. So anyway, would have been great if they had gone with a completely different droid. That would have made things so much more interesting. It is a shame that they did not do that.
Did you hear what I said about that? Why they didn't go with that droid?
I did hear about that. That they needed a way for an astromech to help pilot. But see, that's where I think that could have been all the more interesting, because they didn't need to actually go with that route, but they had story beats that had to be met, because this is Disney. This is how they function. So it is unfortunate. It would have been better if they had gone the route that you were talking about, that you were referring to. All right, so we find out that this character has been taking advantage of the local populace. Okay, understandable. Tatooine is full of a bunch of ruffians. I just don't like this character, because in the end, this character represents a very weird storyline, which is she dated a Jawa, and I've never been able to get past that. So when she has Jawas helping her out, it's like, I can't help but think back to the story that she told last season, and it's like, nope, I can't get past it. So Mando appears, and I love that they have the pit droids. The pit droids are so great. Ever since they were introduced in episode 1, they have been a fan favorite. Not everyone likes them, but they do add some much needed comic relief. And their bad circuitry, which causes them to be so comical, actually contributes to our understanding of how droids work in this world. You have droids that are very functional, very obedient, and then you have ones that are just quirky because their circuits are just slightly fried. It adds some more personality to them. It also allows us to justify what kind of happens with the battle droids later on in the original prequels. So understandable why they did that route, and I personally like that we constantly see those. Mando arrives and says, we need another droid. We need a memory circuit. But first, Grogu shows some fancy footwork and jumps out of the spaceship and lands in the mechanic's arms. And does something that's actually been much needed in a long time. I don't know if you caught this, Rolling Chairs, but they're aging Grogu. And this scene actually did that. It actually introduced that Grogu is starting to slowly mature. But man, it took a long time to get to this point.
Well, we saw some of it in Boba Fett, where he was hopping from rock to rock in a very similar manner. This is just they took it a little step farther, but it was very similar to what we saw in Boba Fett when he was training with Luke.
Well, no, the thing that stood out to me was the words. Was that he's in this season, in this episode, they're starting the transition of adding words to Grogu. I think they figured out that they can't get away with having just the baby mindset for much longer. They've kind of run that storyline to the ground, honestly. They've used it so much.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think we'll get his first words to Mando by the end of the season. Like he'll say like "Papa" or something like that.
Grogu looks up and says, "The way this is." Somehow I have a feeling it will be something along those lines. But we then are told that there is no memory circuits that can be given to Mando to go back and fix the assassin droid. And so they are going to have to find another solution. Remember, he's going to Mandalore. We already showed you the BD droid, which would have been perfect for this. But then the mechanic, who's already been scamming people, says, here, have this rusted piece of bolts, and you are going to be just fine using an astromech on crystallized terrain that has pits. Yeah, it was not well thought out. But they wanted to introduce his character, and so it is a skittish droid and fallen apart. So, no memory circuit, which is unfortunate because it kind of nullified what happened last episode. His whole journey to Navarra was kind of rendered pointless, other than to introduce the pirates. And because the assassin droid journey right now has ended up being fruitless. I mean, it might come back, but for now, it's not there.
I think he'll come back at some point. I think that's why they made such a big deal on it. I think I'm pretty sure I read the synopsis, like their summary on Disney Plus of the next episode, and they go to Coruscant, and I think he's gonna find some, droid smith or whatever they call it there, and I think there'll be more access to different parts on a place like that where you can possibly get something for that.
And let's go over just something kind of ironic. Let me see if I can pull up this here. That is the wrong window. Stand by just a second. Describe a little bit, Roland Chairs, while I'm looking into this. Describe what's the importance of having this droid for those who maybe have not seen this episode yet.
The BD droid or the
of
R5?
the R5.
Well, obviously, the main, I kind of went into it a little bit earlier, but the main reason they obviously had him was they needed a way to get Grogu to Bo-Katan, and they couldn't do that. Grogu can't pilot a ship, and they wanted to find some way of getting Bo-Katan there without her going there with them from the start. And so they just bring this astromech droid that's capable of piloting the Naboo ship, and they just found their own way around it. It wasn't the most entertaining way. Like, they get this droid and they're like 30 seconds into his adventure onto this Mandalore. It's like, oh, he failed, and we're just like, what? Why? Like, it literally, we just spent 2 episodes trying to find a droid, and this one failed right away. And I think that might be a build-up for why he's not going to take a droid like that, where he's going to keep trying to get a different droid like this assassin droid. He's like, this droid's just not for me. Like, what I need to do on a day-to-day basis, this type of droid isn't going to work. But one thing I didn't like about, like, they literally, in Boba Fett, you see them building this Naboo ship, and they build the little section in the back for Grogu, and then they literally just get rid of it right away for this droid. It's just like, so, like, it was just like, why even do that in the last episode? Like, they obviously wanted to tease that, like, oh yeah, they're getting back together by making it accessible for a small creature in the back. But now that they're back together, like, yeah, let's just get a droid back in here and let that droid pilot Grogu now. But I think the assassin droid is definitely going to make its comeback.
Okay, so we're going to show you something for those who are unfamiliar with the world of Star Wars, this universe. This is something that honestly troubles me, that Star Wars has failed this so very much. They don't even know their own map. So I just want you to notice this right here. So the map of Star Wars is actually always up for debate. No one seems to ever reference it. Not George Lucas, not Favreau, not Filoni, not Kathleen Kennedy. No one ever references this map. And it's existed for a long time. George Lucas was always able to, like, just justify, oh, well, there's hyperlane differences, but in the end, even then, it still was fairly poorly laid out. But now we do have a map. And it frustrates me that they never reference it. So here was the first time we actually had like an actionable moment in Star Wars to be able to gauge where things were. So in the first episode of The Phantom Menace, Naboo, when Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and the rest are trying to escape Naboo, they're trying to fly to Coruscant, which is in the core world. It is one of the core worlds. But then they end up going the wrong way and end up in Tatooine. It's justifiable because you can say, oh, look, there's a hyperlane route. And so then it's arguable that, oh, well, they didn't want to go back the way that they would have expected them to go. The blockade would have been in that direction, so they went the other way, which, by the way, that is actually part of Star Wars canon. So they would have went this way to an arc, and then they would have been taking a left and then trying to loop back around, because if you just go out to empty space, good chance of you blowing up is very likely. That's one of the reasons why the Millennium Falcon was such a very good ship. It wasn't that it was the fastest ship necessarily in terms of engines. It was fastest because it could calculate the best route that you could find and even make shortcuts. That's what made it so great. So thus they would have gone this way and would have taken a couple of turns to get to Tatooine, because it was far away and removed. It is not a popular location, which is a little frustrating when we come back to this episode and we act as if Boonta Eve is well known to everybody. And it's like, well, no, nobody even knows. Most people in the galaxy barely know about Tatooine. They've never really paid that much attention to it. And so even though the Empire's gone, Tatooine is not a popular location still. But here's why this matters so much for the story. We come all the way up here. Here's Alderaan. Here's Coruscant, the central capital of the galaxy, always has been, and only really other planets in this region are going to be competing for it in terms of number of terms of population or influence. But you come up here, and this right here is Mandalore. For perspective, this thing is half a galaxy away from Tatooine. Naboo was near Tatooine when they said, hey, well, let's divert. Let's go to Tatooine before we head to Coruscant. That made sense. It was very, very close. But Mandalore is the opposite side of the galaxy. Why in tarnations, when last episode we were with Bo-Katan, would Mando, Din Djarin, turn around and go to the other side of the galaxy just so he could have a throwaway droid? Like, logistically, that is incredibly foolish for a pilot who is cunning as a bounty hunter should be, to not see that he is closer to Coruscant, where he could find these circuits. He's closer to trash worlds around here, where he could have found those circuits. He's closer to old Imperial installations. He's closer to Yavin 4, where they probably have some of this stuff on hand. All these places up here that are crucial, but no, he has to go all the way to Tatooine, a throwaway planet that most people in the galaxy still don't even know exists. And he is going there for a droid circuit, a memory chip that is available on most robots in the galaxy. And remember, there are assassin droids galore around the galaxy. They were used very efficiently. So why does no one ever reference the map? By the way, this is one of the most passionate things you will see me talk about this, because I love maps. I mean, we did a geography video for a stream a while back because I love maps so much. And they did not take advantage of this map. They could have rewritten so much and had such a fascinating storyline, but they didn't. So anyway,
He's just
Mando
wasting gas
gets,
money.
yeah. So yeah, he wastes gas money. He wastes time. And by the way, travel in the Star Wars world until really Disney still took a long time. It wasn't like you were traveling for minutes. You're traveling for days. And so that time always kept shifting. And now it's like they're traveling instantaneous. And that's very unfortunate because that ruins any purpose of there being distance. It's like, oh, we're all so distant out in the Outer Rim. What's so distant about it? I can just press the button on my hyperdrive and I'm here 30 seconds after where I could have been in, like, Naboo. What's so distant about you? But if you have...
This ship is...
Yeah, when you have travel, when you have time, then it should actually impact some of these remote areas. Anyway, I'm done on my soapbox.
Yeah, and he's on a faster ship that's capable of like hyper jump or something. Like it can do it really quickly. And even then, we see in the first episode where they're going through hyperspace, but it's still like they're obviously it's not just boom 1 second they're where they need to be. Like you see him and Grogu just chilling in this hyperspace lane type thing, and even with his fast ship that's capable of doing it, it still takes a while to get around the universe. But they definitely could have. I think they're saving Coruscant for the next episode, but they definitely they obviously wanted to go back to a character we all know on this planet, and she's not the most popular character ever, but there are tons of people who like her, and that's probably just because she's one of the few other characters introduced in this show. But because she's not the most, we don't get the most depth to her character. She does the same thing pretty much every time we see her. At the mechanic lady, I can't remember her name.
Me neither. That's why I just said the mechanic. She's that memorable that we don't even know her name.
And I don't even dislike her. Like I honestly think her character has some funny moments, and just like kind of reminds me of like a funny woman who you'd be seeing working in a small town, like mechanic for cars. Like just someone who's got a interesting personality who kind of knows everyone in the town type thing. But yeah, it would have been interesting to see him like go to interact with new people instead of just going to the same thing. Like she kind of just acts like a jumping point for the plot. Like, oh, we need to get from point A to point B, and how do we get there? Oh, let's just bring this character that we already have introduced, and then we can go to where we need to go.
Point A to point B. By detour of Tatooine. So, Bastion mentioned something interesting here. So, I think he went to the planet because the guy from the last episode said something like, if you can't find it there, you can't find it anywhere. But...
It doesn't make sense, though.
But this character is actually sending out to the core world to order parts for the broken speeder, and when the... Okay, so when she's telling this character, she has to send in for the parts from the core worlds. Why? Because the core worlds are where all the industry is happening. Kind of like back in the 1800s. All the industry was done in Europe. All the resource collecting was happening in the rest of the world, basically. So they would send goods back, it'd be turned into refined elements, and they would send it back out. That being said, core worlds are where memory circuits would have been made for these droids. So she would have to send out for it. So could it be on Tatooine? Yeah, but it's more likely to be found on a junk world. That's where he should have gone. If he wanted something that was outdated, he should have gone to one of the trash worlds, because he would have had a much better time trying to find it other than Tatooine, which, by the way, there's actually some lore as to why Tatooine would even have assassin droid parts. Droid Works, which is a game, but it still has an interesting idea that there are assassin droid factories on Tatooine, so it could be able to reach that portion of the Outer Rim. Not necessarily canon. So if they're making that reference, then they failed to actually pull that thread forward. But anyway, not necessarily the best use of Tatooine for this episode. So now he is stuck. Now Mando's stuck with a toddler and a skittish droid. and he's getting ready to go back to Mandalore, the opposite side of the galaxy. And as he's talking with the character, he's mentioning about, I thought this droid was rated for spelunking and being able to deal with all sorts of dangers because she was kind of built up the droid so much. And then she decides to close the lid of the spacecraft and step back. Notice a problem? By the way, it's an instantaneous thing. She, let me mute it. So she looks at him, closes it, and then, I can't hear you, and then steps back. What's the problem?
Mando can be like, hey, yo. He could just open it himself and be like, yo, what? What are you talking about? This isn't the droid I need then.
He definitely could do that. I'm thinking about the build of a Naboo starfighter. It's got these spires that come from the engine, and you can't walk around it because you have this heat exhaust, and so she would have been fried to a crisp. And she has a metal pole that she'd have to try and do the limbo under to actually get to the other side. So she can't even step back, but they don't understand their own spacecraft. And that's what makes it kind of ironic. They're not paying attention to even the props on set. Interesting, isn't it?
I didn't realize that. Coming up.
Yeah, logic. It's like when you film a scene, it's good to film from start to finish. Just run through every line, have the characters interacting, and that way you can see if there's anything like that might be blocking them. Because if they're closing the lid and say, I can't hear you as they're stepping back, well, they would have bumped into that. You don't have that problem when you're working with a virtual set. You're not having that problem if you're, because in a virtual set, you have to change the camera angles every single shot. You can't just walk through the whole thing. So, sure, it's a convenient little plot point that, hey, it's not going to change too much. But yet it kind of could have been made into a funny moment. Like she starts to back up and then feels the heat and jumps forward, smashes on the glass, and just kind of falls off to the side. And Din just said something like, she's quirky. And then decides just to take off at that point.
Yeah.
They could have added to her character, which is already kind of possible for her to do something like that. But they didn't. Again, missed opportunity.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get much character development from her. Like, she's just going to be, I think she's going to be the same character from the beginning to end. Almost like a sitcom. You know what you're going to get when you go to her, type of thing. And if you like her, you like her. If you don't, then you don't, type of thing.
Right. And actually, this is an interesting point right here. So the next scene, this is something I liked. This is one of the best scenes in the series so far. Their space flight has gotten so good in this one. I love this scene because as we're flying in, this harkens back to how other Star Wars films have been made. Whenever they do a transition, they would jump to the planet and they'd have this very beautiful shot, memorable shot, by the way. And if you saw the discussion yesterday, you'll know that I actually mentioned about the importance of having things that are memorable and like they stick in your mind. Usually you pause on them in the production so that way people can get a chance to soak it in. This one doesn't necessarily do that necessarily, but it's still memorable and it sticks in your brain. This also shows the disconnection that Din had with the rest of Mandalore. He points to the moon and says, that's where I was raised. And I've never actually been to Mandalore. So we start to see someone who is on this very much religious journey. And he's looking up at where he was. And to think that he was always looking at Mandalore and never able to actually travel there, even though he was in an order that very much would have seen it as like some sort of holy site that they would journey to. And he's been traveling all over the galaxy and he couldn't do it. And so it's a touching moment in that sense. Yeah. And you can also see, look at the coloration of the of the planet versus the moon. It's a little hard to see, but the moon actually has a bit more of a blue tint to it. The planet, though, has a green tint, similar to the green crystals that have come about from the fusion bombs that were dropped on the planet.
Mm. And it's very interesting seeing the moon again, not only because we see the home place of Mando or Din, but we also see this is where Bo-Katan and the clan of people she joined with when she was still a part of the royal family of Mandalore. It was Clan Isla or Isla, can't remember exactly how they pronounced it, where she was pretty much what the Din is part of now, where she was trying to bring back, what they were and not this uh, society that has grown so much where they forget about the past. And it's very interesting seeing how it's changed in her point of view of it. I wish we actually I'll go into more of Bo-Katan's experience of it once we see her get there, but it was definitely very interesting seeing both of those planets again, especially after seeing them in Clone Wars for many arcs.
Mm. By the way, again, distance is so important. Here is the map of the solar system. Right here, it's a little hard to see on this image. Let me actually zoom in with a snip tool. Really sophisticated system here. All right, so snip that and copy it. New file. And we will use Photoshop to get this job done. All right, so enhance. So this is the map of the solar system. This planet right here is where Din is from. Well, sorry, just a second. Let me actually have a better marking system. All right, here we go. This really. This is the moon that Din is from. This is the planet Mandalore. This is where Bo-Katan is located. This is where she has her little fortress that we saw last episode. And yet, nobody yet knows if this planet of Mandalore is poisoned or not. Din is the first one who wants to make this journey to discover it. But yet, Bo-Katan is right here. She was so close, and yet didn't even occur. And she does not believe the planet is cursed. But yet she still didn't have any sort of reason to send a probe droid. Which, by the way, is a very big part of Star Wars lore. Probe droids were used all the time. Mostly by the Sith in the films, but it was something that people used throughout the galaxy. It was a very common way to explore planets. And she didn't even think about using a probe droid. And she was right there. That's what I found kind of ironic when I looked at this map. Did you see anything, Rolling Chairs?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I was really wondering why it took another person as a Mandalorian to go to this planet to finally drag her down to there. And even so, if she was so against or just refused to go because maybe she didn't want to confront her past, type of thing, that could have been somewhat interesting. Like if we saw like when Grogu came to get her, that she was like still like nervous to go back there or scared, but she was just like, oh, he's there, he needs my help, then let's go. It's like, oh, so if you're so willing to go, why didn't you go sooner? I think definitely could have made it more interesting if it was just almost like something where she was kind of scared to confront the tragedy of her past and seeing what her home planet has become, but they didn't really dive too much into anything like that. It was very Bo-Katan this episode. I have very many things I like and don't like with how they wrote her. The actors, I like the actress, but they could have written some very great things with her finally coming back to her home planet that they didn't truly give an attempt to do. It seems like I really like say they didn't want her to come back. That's okay, but give us a reason why. And if it's because she's scared or nervous to deal with her past, then you can kind of sympathize with that. Like seeing this place you grew up in, where your family was born and raised, to now see it in Rumble. Like that can be hard to see for some people, even a warrior like her. But they didn't even do anything. They didn't really add anything like that, which is kind of disappointing.
Her character is a fascinating one to me, and I honestly think that we could have quite a bit of discussion about her. And actually, I do want to bring up some things about her at the end here,
Okay.
about her character arc as a whole. But there are some interesting scenes that are coming up that are going to be fascinating to kind of go through. I don't know where I feel about her character, and that's part of the conundrum for me when I see her on screen. So Din and Grogu enter the planet with a very cinematic shot. Very well done. They enter into the atmosphere. They're entering through a storm. And it's like, okay, what sort of rain is this? If this planet is poisoned, does it mean that it could be a dangerous cloud? You don't really know. And then they break out of the cloud and you see the beauty of Mandalore's crystalline crystallized surface, and they start having problems with the comms because the magnetic field of the planet has been disrupted by the fusion bombs. So thus, Din says, "Guess we're on our own from here." Well, correction, he doesn't say it just yet, but he's going to. Instead, he's just looking at the comms and saying, "Comms are busted." And they enter and they land and they send forth the droid. And the droid, sending the droids. The droid then goes out, spooked, and disappears. And so Din then decides that he's going to have to go after the droid. Convenient. So he sent the droid out because he's afraid to get out. And now that the droid's failed, he realizes he's going to have to go out. So he opens up the hatch with his suit pressurized. He's breathing like Darth Vader. And he goes in and finds the city. And he sees the ruin, and that actually was a good shot. You can see the surprise on his character when he comes across it. And then he's attacked. And I don't have a very good snapshot of the creatures. Please, do you remember what the name of the creatures are, Roland Chairs?
No, but I have my problem with the creatures and the monsters in this episode.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Where is he? Where is he? It was a good freeze frame right there. Okay, well, fine. He's stabbing him. So these creatures with tusks on their face and multiple eyes and very powerful and cannibalistic like creatures, and they fight him, and he has to use the Darksaber, which, by the way, is still resisting him. And so he is having a lot of trouble using it. He defeats them.
I think he's resisting it.
Yeah, one of those two things. He finds the droid and takes him back and says, "Just a second, kid, before we continue on, tell me what the readings are." And they find out that the readings are good. It is perfectly clean air. they can breathe. So Grogu gets to join him now. He doesn't need to use his pressurized suit anymore. Oh, wait a minute. That he had a pressurized suit, and he went to go get a droid so he could be able to tell him if the air was poison or not. Wait a minute. Why didn't he just have some sort of device with him that could have told him if the air was poisoned or not? The whole point of the droid was rendered pointless, other than later on this episode.
But and if they were testing the air, why did the droid have to go all the way into the caves? Why couldn't it just get out of the ship and do it right next to the ship? Like it's just like, what? The whole droid with this episode is just kind of annoying.
It is unfortunate, because at the end of last episode, when you and I were talking about it, I was beginning to think that maybe he wanted the assassin droid for backup. Like, not just to test the air, but maybe he wanted to have a warrior along with him, because the assassin droid would have actually been that. And so I started thinking, well, maybe that's what's going to happen. This is going to be actually pretty interesting. And then it didn't happen. It's like, what could have been a really good turnaround to reintroduce the droid and have him like treating the droid as a fellow warrior again, that would have been actually a good turning point that could have helped out the story. But they didn't do that. Greetings, BR Jason. Says Jeff is now on YouTube, has the whole world turned topsy-turvy. Just about, sir. Yes, we are coming over here now, trying to get the hours on the YouTube side up and running. So Mando then says a line that baffles me. He looks at Grogu and says, as they're entering into the cave system, "Guess we're on our own from here." But he also said something very similar to that when they were flying down and the comms started having problems, where he said that we're cut off from the rest of the galaxy down here. So he repeated himself. And that goes into a point that I'll mention later on, but there is a lot of repetition in this episode. A lot of repetition across this entire series, actually. And it's unfortunate. It really should not happen, but it's a way for them to extend the episode. So they enter, they go in, and they start to descend down into the mines. And this is actually a pretty good scene. I like the visuals for it. And I can't pull it up right here because the replay just doesn't want to give me a good shot of it. Well, I guess that's the closest that we're going to be able to get there. But once they're in there, he finds on the ground a Mandalorian helmet. This is a very weird scene for a great many reasons. He sees a Mandalorian helmet, which, by the way, the having the helmet down there is not the thing that's suspicious. What's odd to me is how it's buried. There is a cavity in the helmet. It's surrounded by loose dirt, and it's completely buried. If it was buried like that over years, because of water, because of erosion, the inside of the helmet would have been filled up at the same time. That's how, honestly, that's how ruins get buried. And this one wasn't, which meant that it was only just buried. So that should have been a warning sign. But Mando doesn't take the warning sign. Instead, he pulls it out, and then he's attacked by a transformer. It's the best thing I can describe of this thing. It's very dark. You see this creature come out, grab Mando, grab Din Djarin, and then it injects him so he falls limp. And then this thing with a single eye in its... there we go. A single eye right there in the middle of its visor takes it off. And at first I thought, oh, this is a Grievous character. This is exactly what Grievous was. Very clever. More than meets the eye. Yes, BR Jason. More than meets the eye. So this creature then takes Din and walks off. And Grogu follows and watches as this creature places Din into a cage. And then the Transformer transforms, and out comes the Grievous wannabe. And I know the lighting is horrible, but this creature, which actually resembles a type of bionicle, ends up taking Mando's blood. And it's like, oh great, he's using him to keep himself alive. Interesting. By the way, when this Transformer comes out of the ground, it comes out almost like it's a predator, grabs onto him, and then flips around. A massive machine that that honestly has no equal from what we've seen on this planet at this point, and it just grabs him like it's nothing. If this thing is so powerful, why is he laying in wait? The planet's mostly dead. Do you realize how long he'd have to be waiting there if he's on this life support? If he's a robot that's on like a mission that's programmed to protect something, then yes, it will lay in wait forever. But this thing's a living creature, and it needs blood to keep going, and it's going to lay in wait for who knows how many months until something living comes by, when he has a massive machine and weapons that he could just go out to the surface and grab whatever monster he wants and be able to use it. So strange. How did he know the mines were going to have visitors?
Yeah, the only theory is that he was trying to catch those troll things. But even then, like, if he's the most powerful thing in there, why wasn't he just going after them? Like, why wait and catch them like that?
Yeah, because those troll things are everywhere, as we've seen in this episode. Absolutely everywhere. So he then hears Grogu, who tries to use the Force to help Din, which, understandable. A youth like that would have actually gone in close because they don't understand the full extent of their power. It's not Yoda. Yoda would have actually been able to do it from a distance. This kid is young and thus would not actually know that it's dangerous to go up close. So that made sense. Well done, Disney, for actually having the kid acting like a kid. But then something strange happens, because turns out this cyborg is not the strongest creature on the planet now. He's met his match by Grogu, who's running away. Oh, I'm not laughing at the moment that Grogu gets away from him. I'm not finding it funny that Grogu gets chased by a bat dragon creature. I'm finding it hilarious because of what happens next. He gets up, he sees one of these troll creatures, and he uses the Force. And he comes out the champion. Why did he not use that on the cyborg? I mean, obviously he has strength, and obviously when cornered, his power will flourish. So why was that not his instinct earlier? Which is a little strange.
They need Bo-Katan to get there.
Yeah, precisely. That's the thing. It's so frustrating. It's like, why? Oh, well. Disney, you baffle me. So Grogu gets into the spaceship, and he gets attacked by the bat dragon. And fortunately, can't get through the glass.
Did you notice this? But when he got in the ship, he left his little futuristic wheelchair thing.
Oh, that's
there.
Right.
And then when he gets off of Bo-Katan's ship, he still has it with him. Like, so the only logical way is that thing was following him the ship all throughout the galaxy. It was just trailing behind.
That that's quite goofy. But yeah, that's right. So he takes off, and the dragon's left behind. Well done, R5, for helping to pilot this vessel. And then they go back, and we see the Queen without a kingdom, sitting on her throne still. And then she looks up into the sky and sees that, well, Din's back. And so she gets angry, goes out, and decides that she's going to tell him to leave her alone for good. And she goes out and politely says, I want to be left alone.
Yeah, she says something crazy like, "Let's get rid of him once and for all." It sounds like she wants to kill this dude.
Yeah, sounds like she would have turned the turrets on him. And it's like, hey, let's blast him and so he doesn't come back.
And then all of a sudden she's like, "Oh, never mind. Let's go help him now that he's trapped." It's like, what? So my theory is that the only reason she went, I think she might have only gone for the dark saber, even though she gave it back to him. I think she's kind of playing the long game type of thing. I think she has a plot to get the dark saber back, and there's going to be some type of battle for it between her and Din, similar to what we see in Rebels, where they battle for the dark saber. But I was just so confused. It's like, wait, do you want to get rid of him or do you want to go help him? Like, why? And that one line made me question, like, why are you even going? Because it doesn't seem like you really care about this person or what he's trying to accomplish on this planet. You obviously never wanted to go back to this planet because you haven't gone yet for whatever reason that may be. Her character definitely confuses me a bit. I have so many questions that I hope will get answered, but I don't know if they will for sure.
Yeah. So then she finds out it's Grogu, and she says, what happened to him? Well, Grogu's not going to communicate, so thus she asks R5, and R5 tells that all that she needs to know. Craves the Darksaber, yes, indeed, King of Sanity. This is an interesting ship. It feels like slightly. It feels like a Darth Maul's ship. I thought it was a good design.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a
I
very
really
good
like
design.
it.
And as they're flying in, it's interesting because she, and again I'll mention this later on, but she repeats almost every line that Din gives when they're entering the atmosphere. Repetition is a great grievance I have against this show. So she repeats almost every line just with different wording. And Grogu, look, there's his pod, just like Roland Chairs pointed out.
Yeah. And then they left it on that planet.
Yeah, so yeah, it was falling. It would have been funny if when they're back on the other planet, she comes out and this pod just comes out of the air and bangs against the side of the spaceship. Just bounces off it and falls on the ground. That would have been funny. So they land, and thanks to R5's coordinates, and like, hey, let's go help out your Mandalorian friend. They enter into the cave system.
I have one thing to say about her finally seeing her home planet again. Like she told, like you said, it was repetition, but even so, like she repeated what Mando said, but she says it almost like in a happy, like when she's almost smirking when she says it to Grogu. Like it does. It's like I wish we saw more sadness from her character in seeing her home planet in this way and how she contributed in a way to its downfall with Darth Maul and then the Empire eventually coming through, and maybe she failed to protect it from the Empire and she could have felt guilt, but it's just like she's very blank faced much of the time she's in seeing this destruction of where her family was born and eventually died. It's just like It's
She lacks
I was
any
very upset
emotion
by that.
behind her
Yeah,
face because she hasn't seen this place in years. This should be a distressing moment for her. It should be eating
I
her
agree.
alive. She should be having
I agree.
flashbacks. She should be maybe even having a panic attack when she's there. And she's not. She's just like, I'm a Mandalorian. I'm big and tough, and we're going to go and help out your Din friend. Aren't you going
Yeah,
to take in some of the sights? Aren't you going
yeah.
to be come out
When
and maybe like fall to your knees and kind of like imagine if how Boromir talked about Gondor and Minas Tirith, and then realized we have really a Boromir type character in that she is heir to an heir that is trying to save Mandalore, and there's this up and coming character that challenges it, but she still is supposed to have a nostalgic feeling for this place, and she doesn't show it. And
I
imagine how Boromir would have been with Gondor, how it almost brought him to tears talking about the great city as well as the land and how wonderful it is. It would have brought him to his knees. It doesn't
mhm.
bring her to her knees, and I don't feel that she loves this place.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was gonna bring this up later, but when her after she saves Mando, it would have been, and they get up from the campfire and they go to the mines instead of going straight to the living waters. They should have gone to the throne room. They should have been walking through just like their version of a convenience store, just like seeing like the culture of Mandalore, and that like they should have on their way to the royal palace or whatever they call it. They should have just been walking through like homes where their people used to live, and then when they get to the throne room where her sister was killed by Darth Maul when he overthrew the government here by her fault, which she played a part in. And I agree, some flashbacks where she's just like kind of like seeing like the people, like she has a flashback where she remembers like someone running through the street or when she's on the threat,
Hmm.
and it's all happy memories. And then she gets to the royal palace and she sees Darth Maul challenging Isla for the dark saber, and he eventually wins, and then he becomes the ruler of Mandalore since he won it by their rules. Whoever has the
Hmm.
dark saber should be the ruler of Mandalore by their creed, which they had at the time, the extremists, compared to her sister, who was kind of like, let's move on and be a democratic society type thing, away from the barbaric fighting for power type thing. Um, it should have been like happy memories, like flashbacks, and then she gets to the throne room and she sees. If we got a flashback of Darth Maul sitting on the throne, and it's just her and Mando there, and Mando's like, what's happening? Like, are you
Hmm.
okay?" And she's just like, they could have done so much with her character on this planet. This is just like one idea of a thousand things they could have done for her on this planet. And I was just not, they just did exposition dumps with her character, like of her talking about it while she's going through the mines and stuff like that. It was just kind of
And
disappointing.
repetition at that point. Everything was about
Yeah.
repetition. She repeated everything Din said, didn't add to it. Didn't She could have changed everything Din said and actually added clarity because she was there, and she didn't.
Hmm.
So sad that they did not
And
take any of those opportunities.
there could have been so many flashbacks, like because she interacted with Obi-Wan, her sister in Obi-Wan kind of had a love interest, like Obi-Wan, he felt love, but compared to Anakin, where he was consumed by it, and Obi-Wan understand he had a purpose that was bigger than that, and so he put that love that he felt for her aside and continued his path with the Jedi Order. And we could have just seen so many things, and they kind of hinted it. They're like, yeah, like the Jedi and stuff, we got along at times. It's just like you knew Obi-Wan. Like you literally, your sister was in love with the Jedi. Like there's just so many things that could have been said that just could have added so much to this episode. I was just sitting there. I was like, I wanted so much more from her character in this episode. And it's the writers. It's not her fault. She's just doing what she's told to do. But
Now,
the
granted,
writers.
she could have approached this character in a different way. So, like, I remember when they were doing the casting for Narnia. When they found the character that would play Lucy, they said the thing that stood out to them was that she embodied emotion so well. And she was not a static character. She was a little kid that could turn on emotion in a moment. And it was a variety of emotions that she could do.
Mm-hmm.
This character only brings toughness to her character.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't bring anything else. We have seen more emotion out of Din, even though he's mostly covered by his helmet. We see more emotion with him than we ever see with her.
Yeah. And that's very similar to the way she was in Clone Wars until the end, where her sister's dead and she's talking to Obi-Wan about it. And you really start to see where she understands where she failed in trying to bring back the way Mandalore was in the beginning, how it led to so much chaos. And but you really start to see her feel emotions instead of just being this warrior who is very kind of stoic. And it's just, they got rid of all that emotion that you kind of feel towards the end of the Clone Wars show. And where in Rebels, you kind of see a sadness in her character because she doesn't have the same energy and almost passion that she felt early in Clone Wars. But she was still trying to like bring the Mandalorians together in the Rebels.
Mm-hmm.
It's just they completely got rid of like all emotion or anything with their character, and it was okay in early Clone Wars because she was just like this stoic warrior. But now she's just sitting off on this castle by herself. It's like when Din walks into this castle, it looks sad. Like it's an empty castle, and she's just sitting on the throne, even though she has nobody to rule over. She's not guiding anyone. She's not doing anything. She's just sitting on this throne. It's like a false throne, pretty much. Like she's almost sitting on a tomb there as well, the same way her home planet's a tomb now. And you just there's so much more that could be done with her character that I really like what you said, the flashbacks of just her and Din walking through this planet, and Din's just like trying to like learn stuff about her experience here, just trying to understand Mandalore. And while during this whole conversation, she's just seeing like flashbacks from everything, like when they're being attacked by not the clones, but the droids who fought the clones. I can't remember the separatists or whatever, the separatist droids. Seeing them like trying to invade their planet and how they defend their planet, which is what brings her and her sister together. Because they were button heads on how Mandalore should be ruled, and she's like, that's the one thing that brought them together. Like, we may disagree on how this planet should be ruled, but we're not going to let separatists come in here and overthrow us. Obviously, the Empire eventually does that by just sheer bombings, pretty much, but and just puts them to rest. There's just her character. I just wish there's so much more that was done with her character. I really do like her character in the Clone Wars. She is awesome. She's not just some cool warrior. Like her and her sister's relationship. Her sister is awesome in the show. The way she interacts with Obi-Wan, and they're just, you don't get the sense of everything that she's been through on this planet, everything that this planet's been through. Like, she's just like, yep, I'm here. And she's kind of like smirking while talking about it with Grogu. It's like, what? Like, it'd be like almost like if you go back to your home that your parents owned and they've passed away for 20 years, and you just kind of like reminiscing on the memories you had here growing up as a kid after they're long gone. And you just, like, you'd feel like sadness, or at least some form of just like reminiscing on stuff that you've been through here. Like, this is where you were raised. You get nothing from her in that when she's coming here. Yeah, that was a huge bummer for me in this episode.
There's a couple of things also that stand out to me as she is reminiscing about fighting alongside the Jedi. because we see her face. And as we're going through the caves, she's starting to talk about that the Mandalorians used to be friends with the Jedi. And, we used to fight side by side. It kind of sounds almost like the race of men and elves in some sort of mythology. A bit of a strange thing to be bringing up because we haven't really addressed that yet. And it feels like it should have been a bit more notable in the past. And it's, at least in terms of the prequels, it doesn't really happen. The only thing that we know about the Mandalorians is that they sided with the wrong side. That's the only thing we know about them. And so, based upon the TV show, that can change. But it sounds like their culture should be really intertwined, and it's not. But then she mentioned something else. That she fought alongside with many Jedi. Now, I know that the time frame is shifts around a bit, but that's roughly speaking between, 25 to 30 years. That's a fair amount of time. She's old at this point. She's like in her she's definitely getting on towards the grandparent years, so to speak.
She's near 50, I think. I think she was very young in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, but at the same time,
15.
It still should be that because if we're speaking about just the Clone Wars, so that is in 22 BBY. Mandalorian happens in 9 ABY. So that's close to 30 years. And that there has been some time that has passed between the start of the Mandalorian, which is not currently on this chart. But it still is a fair amount of time. So that meant I would honestly expect someone like her to be a little bit older or more mature in some ways.
Yeah, she's very, her actress, she's a very, very beautiful, woman, but she's definitely not, she doesn't look like she's aged at all. She looks older than she does in Clone Wars and Rebels, but definitely, I agree that they could have some little white hairs popping up in her hair, because her hair literally looks exactly the same as it does in Clone Wars. Exact same hairstyle and everything. There's no really changes. She's just a little bigger, but that's just her actress. She was very skinny in Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. That's really the only change there is. They're the same height and everything. I don't know.
Now, I expected a similar sort of change between her character and someone else that we've seen from that time frame who would have been a child around the same time that she was a child. That's Boba Fett. Boy, someone aged very well by comparison.
Oh, yeah.
So here we have one, and we have that. Which one looks like he's actually lived life, and which one looks like they've stayed at the spa for the entirety of their life? That's just shocking. That they could have really done something to her character. If nothing else, giving her white hair, putting some wear and tear on her. But you don't do that to actresses. It does not go over very well with Hollywood. Doesn't go very well with audiences. That's just how it goes. But still, they should have. This was their prototype that they basically had to go off of. It's like, hey, this is the aging process that we have introduced to the story. Yes, he's been scarred, but he's still relatively the same guy. Look at Luke Skywalker. Look at Princess Leia. Look how they aged. These people have literally aged for the same amount of time, almost exactly by comparison to what you would have expected. She has not aged. And if nothing else, you should have shown that maybe she's trying to... What if you had it that you saw that she was being treated because she still wants to think of herself as nobility? That would have added something to her character, and that would explain why she looks the way she does. She's getting like treatment because she still has this queen mindset in her head, not a warrior mindset.
She was anti-royal. She was really anti the royal family and stuff. But like, she didn't want to be queen. She wanted the warrior life that the Mandalorian is built upon. But when you do compare it to Boba Fett, like, that really put into perspective for me. I always knew she'd look older, but when Boba Fett's a literal child in the Clone Wars, and she's a teen, like, she's near in her 20s. She might even be low 20s almost in Clone Wars. And when you put it that way, it really does put into perspective. Where, oh crap, like, this is not right.
Yeah, so she goes in and she's talking about how great they work together with the Mandalorians and the Jedi. And then she shows off what a great Mandalorian she is by fighting off one of these cave trolls. It's like, okay, great, you can fight off a cave troll. Din fought off 3 of them simultaneously. But so she helped to do that. Then she goes in and they find, okay, there's that creature. They find the cyborg going about the process of removing all the fluids from Din. Poor Din. He is suffering horribly as he is being bled dry. And this machine, which we don't know how it functions, but it adds to the mystery of how this creature is alive with just an eye and a brain. And she comes in and uses Din's dark saber to defeat the creature very quickly. Now, I know that there's a lore behind the dark saber. I don't really understand it very well, but it feels like to me this dark saber is very easy for some people to wield and very hard for others to wield, almost as if it's a sort of Harry Potter wand, one that will resist the abilities of some because it doesn't belong to them. It will change allegiances because it's a living thing. I don't know if you got that same feel, but it definitely felt like that to me.
That is very much true. That the sword, it's very similar to Jedi's lightsabers. It's a very personal connection to the user. But with her, I think she has wielded it. If I remember correctly, she has wielded it before. So this isn't the first time we see her use it. Like in the Rebel show, I'm pretty sure we see her have it, or maybe in she's had it before. And I think she used it for like combat once or twice until Darth Maul took it or something. But the way you get it, and that's the reason I don't think she took it from Din, even if her greed told her to, is the way that for people is, if you want it, you have to challenge the person in 1v1 combat. And the person who has it has to accept. Like, if this person thinks they can be a better, more powerful, stronger ruler than you have to defend your claim of you, the wielder of the saber, to that you're actually the most powerful, strongest warrior. And we see that's how Darth Maul gets it. That's how in Rebels, Satan gets it, and it's very based on their warrior thing, because they are very warrior-like people. Like their armor and everything. Like, yes, they did get along with Jedi at the time, but much of their armor and inspiration for it was so they could defend themselves against Jedi. Because they almost viewed the Jedi as tyranny, like they were doing the government's bidding at times. Like, that was their relationship with them. That's why they used the Darksaber, so they could have a ruler with the same weapon as them.
But yet they fought side by side, and they were very good friends.
Well, that was before. Yeah, that was before that.
Oh, okay.
They had a falling out. And you'll see when Bo-Katan gets the Darksaber, she uses this wire. Like, that was that wire that she uses to shoot at the dark saber and pull it towards her, that's their version of the Force. They literally tried to mimic the Jedi in every way possible that a natural person without Force abilities could. Like they were heavily inspired by being able to defend themselves from Jedi and being able to do
Clever.
the same things Jedi could do. It's a very interesting relationship that I can't remember the exact full lore of it. You know, there's so much that goes into it, but it's a very interesting relationship between her and the Jedi. And her and Obi-Wan's a huge part of her kind of accepting Jedi again, especially because of the relationship Obi-Wan had with her sister. But they are definitely a warrior-esque people. I kind of strayed off for a bit there because I meant to make that point earlier.
No worries. What I find strange about this darksaber is just how easily she wields it.
Yeah.
But that's one of the frustrations that I have with this darksaber as a whole. The fact that it's heavy to some and it's light to others, but yet these things are not infused with any sort of magic. They're pieces of technology, and it's really bizarre. Now, if they made it to where like they didn't know how to perfectly imitate a kyber crystal, so they used a very compact piece of Beskar, and when not properly wielded, it actually would fight the user because it's actually a mineral blade that is hyper volatile because it's superheated, that would have actually made more sense. And so if you knew how to like wield it in a different manner, then that would have given it like legitimate reason why some people could wield it easily and others would struggle with it. But right now I feel like we're dealing with a magic item, and this is Star Wars, and we've not seen magic tech like this.
Well, we kind of teased this conversation earlier. You said that it's resisting him, and I said I think he's resisting it. Like right when he gets the darksaber in the season 2 finale, he tries to give it right to Bo-Katan. He's like, I didn't kill Moff Gideon, or I didn't take it from Moff Gideon for me to be the ruler of Mandalore. Which, if he has a sword, that's what it makes him. He took it just to kind of save Grogu. Like that was the whole process. And you see on her face where she realizes, oh crap, if I want this sword, I'm going to have to fight this dude and kill him or take it from him. And because that's the way that you earn that sword in this way of life in Mandalorians. And I don't think he wants it, because literally right when he gets it, he's like, this isn't what I wanted. I want Grogu is my mission, my creed is my mission, things like that. And
but again, it shouldn't be heavy. That fighting it is one thing.
I think he's resisting it.
But the thing is, it's not magic. The thing is literally as light as your cell phone. Because
isn't the lightsaber kind of magic?
No, they never were. The only bit of power behind it was what they used the Force. So like one of the things they would do is they use the Force to activate the buttons. Some of them had a complex activation, so other people couldn't just wield it whenever. But we see people like Han Solo pick it up and use it to cut open a bantha. Cut open a God, why can't I think of it? I'm thinking because of Boba Fett, but a tauntaun. It cuts open a tauntaun with it. Other people pick up lightsabers, and there's some folks that have no Force ability that wield lightsabers. So yes, even Disney has done it with the sequel trilogy. So the fact that they have a character, have a lightsaber, which is light, like literal beams of light, out of a handle. So if you can pick up the handle, you can wield it. The thing that made lightsabers dangerous, why only Jedi could wield it, and now this is something that George Lucas actually mentioned about when they were filming the prequels. He said the reason why only a Jedi should use a lightsaber is because it's so light that if you're not using the Force to know where the blade is, you would cut off a limb. Because it is so light, you would lose control of it. There's no weight. And then you would use the Force to basically give yourself more momentum because it is light. And so if you have to cut through something heavy and sturdy, you need the Force to kind of give you extra muscle strength to punch through it. But the weapon itself is incredibly light. So
Yeah, the dark saber is
that's
very
why this
different.
saber makes me frustrated.
I'm pretty sure the dark saber, it's a broken kyber crystal. Like it's two pieces of one kyber crystal, and the reason it was introduced into Mandalorian is because there was a Mandalorian who had force abilities, and he kind of learned the way of the Jedi, but felt more loyalty to his people on uh, Mandalore. So he, especially since I'm pretty sure his people started fighting the Jedi's around that time, so he kind of had this saber. So it's a very different lightsaber because it's a broken crystal, whereas the Jedi's it's one kyber crystal. So
Hmm.
there is something very different about it, but I'm pretty sure all lightsabers have like some type of connection with at least Filoni and I think Disney, where the user, the Jedi user, has a connection with their saber, and I think they're really trying to bring that back. I think that they're trying to add another layer to where it's just not like, oh, this is something easy that anybody can use type of thing. I think they're trying to add another layer to it, which I don't really mind, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, the
And I
reason
think,
why I do mind with this is because then it feels like Harry Potter. And it's like they're not writing down the rules. They're changing the rules on the fly. I mean, there is one way you can actually make the kyber crystal work that when you have it fractured. You could say that, again, it's doing something that's scientifically plausible, which is that maybe it's spinning and the kyber crystal is like being used and it's spinning and it's causing this momentum inside of the saber that makes it very hard to change direction. But to make it heavy and then have it so light in another person's hands, that just makes it magical. And it's so utterly frustrating for a world that was based upon a science fiction. And yes, there's space wizards, so to speak, but they're very weak by comparison to what an actual wizard would have been. It's all focused so much on this idea of technology, and so to have something that's disrupts every bit of the story around something like the lightsaber is very frustrating. But anyway, those are the two perspectives on that. We'll probably come back to the dark saber when they actually like do something with the story on it. But for now, I just saw a scene where this character wields it like a Jedi and then fights the giant cyborg transformer wannabe. And then they heal. Then they get Din back, and then they give him a special type of soup that is based upon Mandalorian culture, just to show again disconnection that he himself has not actually been a Mandalorian the way that Bo-Katan was, and it's a bit of an insult to him in that sense of that he did not grow up the way that she did. He's kind of a newcomer, so to speak. But yet the newcomer is the one who has this mission to want to live up to this tradition of having the chance to bathe in the mines of Mandalore. So it's a contrast here. You have someone who was trained in all the ways of Mandalore, who is kind of casting him aside, and someone who was only partially raised on it, who is determined to follow every step that he can. I actually found that a good comparison, and it was all through a bowl of soup, so to speak. He picks up his weapons, and she decides to Bo-Katan shows him to the mines. And by the way, this is where those flashbacks could have been happening, right here, as they're walking through the city. They get down into the mines, and Din gets ready to go into the waters. It's a very dark scene, and unfortunately doesn't show up very well on the screen, so my apologies. So he enters into the water, and It's actually a very touching moment. He starts to enter, and he has no other thought than that I need to do what is right here. I need to press on and restore myself here with this washing. And so he walks into the water, reciting the creed. But then something happens. And this is something that's very unfortunate. A moment that should have been touching and inspiring, a very much a religious journey, is cut short by an action sequence. He gets sucked under the water. And while under, he sinks all the way to the bottom, which, as I measure, is probably about 200, 300 feet under the water, because Bo-Katan has to use rockets to go down and get him. And she finds him on the bottom and starts to take him back up, and then we see it. The creature that lives in the water. And then takes him back up to the surface. And that's where the episode ends.
I said my 2 bits about that final scene.
All right. Feel free.
So, I liked it, but I also have some things I dislike. I wish, instead of Bo-Katan being so anti, like, this is just some gobbledygook, like, why are you even doing this? Like, this is pointless. I think she should have, even okay if she doesn't quite believe in it, but she should still understand, like, some type of history with it and her people. And I think it should be understood. You say these words, and then maybe you do get sucked down to the bottom. Because the way he gets sucked down, I was like, oh my gosh, is he really fighting another monster? Like, is there seriously going to be another monster that's going to be fought in this episode? Like the 4th time, 5th time in this episode? I was kind of done with it at that point. And Grogu should have been like freaking out. He's like almost getting out of his crib thing and being like, okay, I need to go save him. And then Bo-Katan could be like, this is part of it. Like, you have to like deal with this and come up and fight this and become a new person almost. And he should have been sucked to the bottom, and then we should have seen him fighting his way back to the top instead of Bo-Katan. I'm fine with Bo-Katan saving him. Like, that's not what I'm against. Like, when Bo-Katan came to save him from that monster, that's not, like, that was okay. But with this thing in general, it should have been like a personal journey type thing. Because, like, it should have been something that's just him for this moment. And when he's soaring up, he comes to the top. And he finally makes it to the top, and along his way he sees this mythosaur, which is the brand of his clan. So he finally truly sees with his own eyes where this is coming from, and his people with this mythosaur thing. I don't know the exact name of it. And
yeah, it's
he
correct.
tries explaining it to Bo-Katan, and she still kind of has her doubts. And then I think later in the season, we should have seen them come back, and Bo-Katan goes down for herself and tries to be reborn, and I think she should have joined the Creed maybe later in the season. And this is her way of being almost accepted back into it and trying to take steps in the path with this Creed that's been created. And then she finally sees this with her own eyes, and that's kind of like reassurance for her, like, okay, there's something here. But I will admit, like, even though I see that there's some importance with it, I still do have questions, like, why is this creature so important? Like, yes, it's on their armor. Yes, we see it in these waters that are so important to them. But other than that, like, what makes it so important? It could just be like any other aquatic creature that just happens to be in these waters. Like, I do have questions about it.
Mm-hmm.
But
I find it
I've said to you,
funny how both times we've seen a Mandalorian basically joining the Creed, and both times they're attacked by a water creature.
Yeah.
It's like, does the Creed... Maybe the Creed should find a bathtub, because this is a pretty dangerous way to go about getting indoctrination. But if that was part of it, like if that was actually part of the lore, is that this Creed like sparks animosity with the creatures that are in the area because it carries weight, then they could have actually argued that away. But then that would have been part of that journey that you mentioned about, where they have to survive it to come out the other side. But they don't have anything like that. So thus it makes this whole journey to the mines very unfortunate, because it doesn't actually carry weight. And I feel like this is the problem. I'm trying to find a lighter scene. All right, let's just back up to the planet itself. When they travel to this planet, it's almost like the people who wrote this don't actually understand religion, because they're writing an action movie, and they're not understanding the need for the pause, for them to have this moment of collecting themselves and having everything disconnected, and have the spiritual side of things take over. Action takes back seat to trying to establish something like that. If they were to do it with a reverence, like let's say that Din gets to the caves, he's getting ready to go into the water, and he's being heckled by Bo-Katan, saying this is pointless, this is worthless, and he's just citing the Creed as he's stepping out to the water. And then he steps forward, dunks himself in completely under, and he flashes back to the very first time that he had sighted the Creed, and we see him as a kid. And then we see him come out, and he has a realization. He realizes both the order that he'd been a part of, that was following the Creed, has lost their way. He sees that Bo-Katan has lost her way, and he sees another way. And that becomes a big part of his mission moving forward, is how to merge these factions together, which Bo-Katan was complaining about earlier, saying we are fighting each other. What if that moment allows him to finally see things clearly? And he gets out as she's heckling, and it doesn't even faze him, because he now sees the way forward.
That would have been great.
That would have actually could have been done, and we actually would understand why the Mandalorians are the way they are. It would have explained everything to the audience who doesn't understand this Creed. It would have given us a chance to see that there is going to be a goal to this entire series, and not just this season, the entire series. And it would have actually been reverential to these characters and their Creed. It's just unfortunate that they did not take that route, and it could have been so impactful, but they didn't.
Yeah, that would have been great. But even if you're analyzing it just from the way Disney did it, like, he got pulled down underwater by that mythosaur, or
the mythosaur
in some way. But why did that mythosaur just pull him all the way down and just be like, "Yeah, you're done"? Like, he just pulled away. Like, what? Like, I didn't really understand it. Like, because when Bo-Katan and Din was going by that creature, it was just sitting there watching them, like almost like a understanding creature of these waters, like understanding what happened here and type of thing. But like the way I didn't understand it. Like, it was really weird. Like the way he got pulled down into those waters. I think it would be better if it was just like the waters itself just sucks him down, and he's got to fight his way back to the top. And then along the way, he sees this creature that is of their people up to the top. And I don't know. There's a good idea there for what Disney could have was on the way of doing, but they just didn't really nail the execution, in my opinion. And like most things, people saw that creature. I was watching, I saw some tweets of it and stuff, just like from fans, not like content creators or anything. And they were just like, oh my gosh, it's this creature. Like, this is amazing. And it's just like, yeah, but nothing really else came from this interaction or this scene now, except for that this we got proof this creature is real, and there's some part of it has been carried on to now these people who are living worlds away, like that it's just been passed down to them in some way. But other than that, like we don't learn anything about Din, and I really hope the next episode starts off with where we see him kind of get sucked down or fought down by this creature. And I really hope we see the flashbacks, kind of like what you were saying, where he first says the recites the words of the creed, and I hope that's where the next episode carries off, where we see it from his perspective, Bo-Katan going to save him, type of thing. But I really wish it was just a personal journey type thing instead of, because if he went by himself, say he didn't get caught by that robot human creature, and he just made it all the way there by himself, he'd be dead. Like, the only reason this worked is because Bo-Katan was there. Grogu wouldn't have been able to save him. It's just like, wow, like it doesn't make sense. Like it should have been a fight almost, but not like an action fight, like just like a personal fight where he has to make his way back to the top type thing, instead of having to rely on another Mandalorian who isn't even taking part in this Mandalorian version of a baptism to be saved almost. I don't know. It could have been done differently, but I really do like the idea of it. It's just there definitely could have been things that were done differently.
Yeah, I feel like if they had someone who wrote it with an understanding of what it meant to have a conversion moment, I think we would have had a much more impactful scene. Because right now, Disney's writing by formula. Action sequences sell. And so, which I actually disagree with. I think that action sequences are cheap knockoffs of what you could do. Because it's hard to get actors to actually prepare for lines. It's very easy to get them to say, hey, just do this action scene. It takes them very little effort. Now, if it's a sword fight, it's something completely different. It takes a lot of effort to actually prepare a sword fight. Not just randomly slicing at something in the air like Bo-Katan did, but I mean an actual lightsaber fight. Those take a long time to prepare, and a lot of thought goes into them. When you see those battles in the prequels, not the sequels, the prequels, they spent days and weeks preparing for each fight, and every move actually had direct lore implications. Like, I was seeing a video a while back that was mentioning that when and this video is out there, and I had to look at this multiple times to actually see what it was being referred to, and I can agree that this is very surprising that nobody actually caught this. When Anakin is dueling Obi-Wan on Mustafar, let's see here. When Anakin is dueling Obi-Wan on Mustafar, he uses a very interesting move, and a lot of people didn't really think much about it, because in the end, it didn't seem like it had any sort of correlation. It was this, so when he was on Mustafar, he swings his lightsaber in such a way that it's like, oh, that's a fancy little move, and Obi-Wan blocks it, and it's no big deal. Well, when you play that back compared to the opening sequence, when he takes on Count Dooku, well, suddenly it takes on a whole different meaning, because it is the very move that he used to remove Count Dooku's hands. And so suddenly this battle, which felt very epic to begin with, when compared to other scenes and actually doing an in-depth analysis of what was happening, we realized there was actually a lore implication to why he did that move, and something that they practiced for hours every day to try and get those moves down correctly, because they wanted someone to be able to analyze and see, hey, those are the exact same moves between here and here. So when we see action sequences in The Mandalorian, it all feels very weird because their action sequences feel cheap. They don't have deep lore behind them. They're not contributing to some grand scheme. There's very little repetition in such a way that someone could analyze and say, hey, that's the same move that they used elsewhere, or they're not using this one particular move because they have a creed that prevents them from doing it. All these things in their action sequences are very much based upon what sort of goal they're trying to have as the outcome, and not thinking about how to weave it together so it's seamless.
Mm-hmm.
So when we come to Mandalore and we have the action sequence at the Mandalorian baptism, it feels out of place because it's nothing more than kitsch action sequences. So now that we're done with the play-by-play of what happened, I want to address something about the Mandalorian as a whole. This series is plagued by repetition. Lines that are reused over and over and over again. There is a lot of those sequences that really doesn't feel very impactful just because we've heard the same stuff over and over. It's not something that you can really rewatch and try and find new Easter eggs because you have heard a lot of this stuff so many times. The amount of times that they say the same words is also a bit grating on the ears. I did not do any sort of tally, but the amount of times they say Mandalorian is so often that I just tune it out. It doesn't roll off the tongue. It doesn't have any sort of deep impact upon me as a viewer. And they could have filled in those words with something completely different that would have had more of an impact. And they're not doing it. It's unfortunate. Repetition also happens in where they're going to. Like when I was mentioning about, hey, there are so many places that Din could have gone. He didn't need to go back to Tatooine. He could have gone over to any number of locations around here. By the way, there are shipyards in that area. There are factories in that area. There are places of commerce. And so the fact that he would go all the way across the galaxy is just so silly. But they had to do it because they wanted to bring back Tatooine. Repetition. They didn't want to introduce something new because that would take money. They wanted to use the same lines over and over again. Why? Because they didn't want the characters to have to say all these eloquent, quotable moments, because that would require thought and effort, and they have to churn these things out really fast, so they don't have the time to actually dwell on what these lines should be. So they just say, quick, write something. Is it good enough? Yeah, it's good enough. Let's just run with it. Oh, we're running low. We don't have enough time. Quick, duplicate the line and let's use it again from another character. That's not a good way to tell your story. You need your characters to say impactful lines all the time. And if you're to have this series really proceed into from temporary classic to a classic that will span generations, you need those moments that are quotable, that are impactful, and none of this is being prepared in that way.
I completely agree.
Yeah, help me, Disney. Describe to me why we should have this care for your story when you're not putting that same level of care into your writing. Here's an example. I rewrote the last episode. I rewrote episode 5 from Book of Fett. I spent a week churning through that, and then I thought about it for another week, and then wrote a little bit more. For a total of, I think it was 5 writing days, 2 weeks of thought. I rewrote it because I wanted to have it be influenced by the past and also by the future. I wanted it to carry memorable moments. And even though I'm not the best writer in the world, the thing is that when I was doing it, I was coming up with so many better ideas because I let time pass between iteration. And when the final was done, I was actually looking at it and saying, this actually gets me excited about where the story could go. I don't feel like their writers are approaching this in the same way. I feel like they're making up an episode a day, and then they just start filming. That's what it feels like. I feel like it's being written by a team of people that are taking notes from the person who's in charge of the story, and then kind of doing a human version of an AI-generated script and just quickly putting some together, writing by formula, as Disney requires their writers to do. Yes, that is something they do. So, does Mandalorian have a future if they keep doing that? I don't think so. I think a lot of the stuff will start to get boring. Kind of like what you mentioned, Rolling Chairs, about by the 4th action sequence of fighting, it's like, I'm so done with it. Let's move on. Let's have something that's impactful. Because in 20 minutes of showtime, we should not have 4 action sequences like that. We should have maybe 2 or 3 max.
Yeah, I agree. And not only that, the action sequence didn't really even add it. It was just Mando or Bo-Katan just fighting a troll that's not a part of the grand scheme of things. It's just there to add action between exposition. And it's definitely just to keep that's the way they think they can keep people entertained.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to do something different here. I've not done any sort of elaborate sort of preparation for how we would go about ranking this, but right now I want to rank each of these scenes based upon a couple of elements, and then we're going to combine them together to a final total. So all we have is a yes or a good or a bad. For this opening sequence, from the moment that we first get introduced back to Tatooine to when we're leaving with the robot, Rolling Chairs, what would you give for... would you say that the characters were compelling in the scene, or were they not compelling? Overall,
as far as the characters go, the opening scene, I'd probably give it like a 5 out of 10. Could have been worse, could have been better. My huge thing with that was I was just staring at the BD droid the whole time. Like, please, just take the BD droid with you. That was my huge thing with the opening part.
Okay, so a 0.5.
Is it 5 out of 10 or out of 1?
So it's more like 1, just because of how the scoring system is set up. So 1 or 0?
0.5. 0.5.
0.5, okay. Mostly because, like I said, I need to work out on this scoring system. Right now I'm working off of a spreadsheet that I've created, and so then this information gets put into the spreadsheet, and it generates the final score for the video.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, got it. So you give it a 0.5 for the setup of what needs to happen. I am going to give it a 0. We'll just keep it in those three categories: a 1, 0.5, or a 0. We will change that for next time. I will create a better system, but right now the spreadsheet is just limited to that.
Right.
Next, we have dialogue. Was a dialogue / plot. Was it compelling, and did you feel like it contributed to the story?
Well, I would give it like a 3, but it would. So actually, a 2 or 3, but with Bo-Katan especially, she was the biggest person that I wish had better plot in this episode. So I'd put it closer to 0, honestly.
So this is just for the scene itself.
Oh, for the scene itself.
Yes.
Because
0. we're going through each of the scenes like this. So a 0. I'm actually going to give it a 0.5 because we do have some sort of improvement. I don't like the character that's there, but we do leave with some sort of impact. But yes, we have a difference on that one. There isn't really any sort of really isn't any sort of action, so I think both of us would just kind of put that as an NA, which would just generate to a 0.5 because it just neutralizes. Setting. Was the setting compelling, and was it did it feel like it was Star Wars? I personally thought yes, so I would put it at a 1.
I put it at for this particular scene, 0.5. My huge complaint with the setting of this place is it feels. You would think that it's just Mando. So the way they do it is they'll have her talking to a character in the beginning, and then Mando will come in, and then Mando's the only one in that place. You would think she'd be orchestrating a whole business, like, hey, you droids over there, you're fixing that ship. You droids over there, you're fixing that ship over there. But no, once Mando gets there, everything's dropped in the whole place, and it's just him, and nothing else matters, and there's nothing else going on there. I really wish we'd see like droids in the background fixing other ships and doing other stuff while what's important to this story is going on. So 0.5.
Right. All right, so that averages out to a 0.44 for this scene.
Then
we move on to the next scene, which is first time on Mandalore, because there will be the second time when Bo-Katan comes here. So the first time on Mandalore, was the character interactions meaningful and impactful to the story?
Yeah.
Oh, are you getting older?
Yeah, a bit.
Oh, okay. Out here, I was like, I don't know if we have a story yet.
Yeah, I was making a call.
Yeah. We'll stand by just a moment.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm good now.
All right. Let's see here. So the character and development for the story, just based upon character interactions for this scene.
I'd put it at a 1.
Okay. I'll put it at 1 too. I did like that scene. The dialogue. I'm going to put that at a 1 as well. Well, actually, I'm going to change mine to a 0.5 because I don't like the robot. But for the
Are we
dialogue,
talking about like him flying in, or
for the sequence of him being from when he flies into Mandalore to when Grogu leaves?
Okay. Yeah, I put a 0.
0.
I mean,
okay.
yeah. I really wanted a different droid. I really wanted the BD in it. That was like, it consumed me my first watch through of it. I was like, come on, the BD droid could be doing so much better here.
Okay, so then the dialogue for the scene.
Um,
How it contributed to the story. Was it good? Did it feel meaningful?
I'd put it at 0.5 until it gets repetitive, like you said. Then it might go down to 0. But the first time you hear it, I put it at 0.5.
Action. Was the action compelling? Everything from the trolls at the entrance down to the battle with the Transformer.
I'll admit, I was really tired of fighting monsters and stuff like that. So I'd probably put it at a 0.
I will put
That's
it
not
at a 0.5.
that's not what I wanted from the episode.
Understand. I'll put it at a 0.5 because there were some moments that I actually think worked out, but no, I'm going to put it at 0. No, I'll keep it at 0 because I felt like this, it should have been focused on something completely different. Setting, I'm putting it at a 1. I liked the setting for Mandalore.
Yeah, 1. That was the only part that made me feel like sadness almost from the things from seeing Mandalore as a peak to now.
Okay,
so, yeah,
now
1.
Now we have the arc of Bo-Katan. So this is gonna go from the moment that we arrive, when we see Bo-Katan, all the way to when they rescue Din. Not when they start going to the mines, but all the way up to when they rescue Din. So everything that had to do with Bo-Katan being the main character.
Okay.
Were the characters compelling, or were they not?
I'd put 0.5. I had hope, but there could have been a lot more there.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to put mine at a 0 because I really did not like that character arc. That it missed so many opportunities. If it had taken any number one of the opportunities to make her feel more personal, and well, it would have been better, but it was not.
I agree.
Dialogue, I'm going to put that at a 0 too because it was repetition of what Din said earlier, and it didn't add to our understanding other than kind of, I'm going to say, giving kitsch for the Mandalorian story as a whole. It was nothing more than just, oh yes, we were once friends, we fought side by side. They always say that in movies like this. How about you actually demonstrate something that would have actually meant to show that you mean what you say? Then it would have carried more weight. But just saying generically we fought side by side, sure, great, we used to fight with the Russians side by side until they decided to start the Cold War, and then suddenly we are not fighting side by side.
Yeah.
Every nation's fought side by side during one time or another.
Yes,
that means nothing.
Actually, a very good comparison. They fought in common cause, but now they're complete opposite sides.
Yeah. So dialogue, what would you give? 0 to 1.
0.
0. Okay. Action.
0.
0. I give it a 0 too. Setting, I'm going to give it a 0.5 because we didn't see as much of it as the previous one, but I still like the setting. It's more like we didn't focus on the setting, whereas if we had the flashbacks, it would have been a 1.
I agree, but that probably would take me down to 0. I really wanted to see Bo-Katan interacting with her home planet much more than just walking through the main street.
Right. Okay, so
I wanted to see the throne room. I really wanted to see the throne room.
That would have been a great sequence. Then, from the soup scene down to the very end of the episode, the characters, were they compelling? I'm going to put it at a 1, not because of Bo-Katan, but because Din is showing the character arc that I would like him to have, which is dedicated, and almost single-minded, focused on getting this job done?
I'd probably put between a 0.5 and 1. Um, I'm gonna do a 0.5
Okay.
because, like I said, I have a lot more expectations for Bo-Katan than we got for this episode. So, and I think Mando could have had a few more, especially with the final scene. I think he could have had much more character development.
So dialogue.
Uh, 0. It was pretty basic dialogue for the final act.
I'm going to put 0.5 because there were actually some good lines that were said. But again, if the setting and was set up differently, I would have definitely given it a 1. But it was the lack of what could have been said, and the fact that the action, which I give a 0 because it completely sabotaged the dialogue.
Yeah.
So action, what would you give it?
0.
0. Setting.
One.
1. I'm going to give it a 0.5. I felt like they could have done more with adding the culture to it as they're walking down. Seeing like, even if they didn't have to do flashbacks, all they had to do was show some ruins that would have added to some of the culture. Kind of like the plaque that was down there. The plaque was good, but they needed things like that as they're journeying down.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, actually, I might be closer to 0.5. Because I think I put 0.5 to the last one. I'd like to see the throne room and just normal places of living on a day-to-day basis of Mandalore.
All right, so now I'm going to average these together. So stand by, folks. Just a moment, I will have this good to go. All right, so we have averaged that this score is a 4 out of 10.
Right.
It could have been so much more, especially since we've built up to this scene for so many episodes. Technically, he's been trying to get redeemed, you could say, for seasons at this point, and it hasn't happened. And so, if only they had put the weight behind this that they had put behind if they put more weight into their dialogue and their story building than they put into their action, then we probably would have been super happy with this episode. It had such potential, but it didn't. And so that brings us to the end of this Mandalorian review. We are going to be doing the 3rd episode later on this week. Right now we have to figure out our scheduling. Right now we don't really know if it's going to be possible because I have obligations, Rolling Chair has obligations, and so we will find a time frame for that, and then we will proceed with doing the episode. We might have to delay it by a few days if our schedules don't quite work out, because right now the audience is small enough right now where I think we can be able to make it flexible and won't impact a whole lot moving forward. But now is a chance for you to give your thoughts on this episode, for you, the audience. Was this an episode that you enjoyed? Is there elements of this episode that we've gone over that you agree with or disagree with? Let's see here. Bash is just here giving us Yoshi's. Thanks, Roland Chairs, for asking the question to everyone. We'll give you all a couple of moments to kind of think of something, because we did mention a while back that we wanted you to give your thoughts on it prior, and so that way, if you had a chance to think about it, then you just be able to jot it down right now. Or if you're trying to figure out something to say, just say, hey, writing down a response right now, so that way we know if you're going to be participating, because we don't want to hold people hostage if we're not going to be going over any more new information. But I would like to actually pose an idea of how you could have saved this episode. We've already addressed some of the aspects, but here is like a scene by scene what it could have been. This is not going to be the lore building script that I was trying to do last time. No, this is going to be just solely based upon what we've gone over right now. Imagine it like this. The episode starts and we see Din going down to a junkyard. And while he's there, he's trying to go through broken, thrown away assassin droids. And as he's going through it, he finds every one of their memory chips has been fried because the New Republic was very thorough in making sure none of these assassin droids survived. And they didn't want anything in their circuitry to be salvaged. And so they went by and manually had every one of them shocked such that that memory chip was fried. Din is looking around in frustration, and he is wandering through this junkyard market, and he recognizes a familiar face. He goes over and finds the mechanic from Tatooine. The mechanic has been traveling, trying to find parts to take back to her mechanic shop back on Tatooine. And so she's looking for broken machinery, and she has with her a couple of droids. One of them being the BD droid. And Mando is trying to find the circuit that he's looking for, and she sees an opportunity. She sees that Mando's here, and Mando has a bit of wealth with him, and so maybe she can be able to buy more stuff if she gets Mando to spend some money. And so she offers him a droid and says, how about you buy this droid from me? We both benefit. I need to have more money for these parts, and you need a droid to go with you down to Mandalore. And this one right here, this fancy little BD droid, and a part falls off of it. Oh, come on. It's perfectly fine. This thing is designed for what you're looking for. It can sample the air. It can go spelunking with you. It can literally hold on to the side of a rock wall. It falls off the wall as she's trying to hold it up on. It's like, looks broken. Oh, this is perfect. It's completely fine. It starts shivering. It's like, put on your best behavior for Din here. And so he says, fine, I can't find the part that I'm looking for, and I'm running out of time to make this happen. You got yourself a deal. And so he hands her some coins, and then he takes the robot with him. And there's not enough space for the droid, but since it's small enough, he can just put it into the pod with Grogu, and then Grogu starts trying to rip off a piece of it. It's not a toy. Put it back. And then Grogu sticks like the antenna back on, and adding some more personality to it. They land on the planet, and Din is mentioning about how much he has wanted to journey here, about how impactful it is that he is getting a chance to see the home world that he has only seen from a moon up until this point. It's actually something where he is hesitant to even get out. He looks at the kid and says, you know, I actually have an ability to cycle the air in my helmet so that I don't have to worry about any toxins, but now that I'm here, I don't think I want to even step foot on this soil. I feel unworthy. And so he sends the droid forward, and the droid comes back and mentions that there is clean air, but also found an artifact that is somehow impactful to his order. And so he decides that it's worth it to actually carry through with his mission. So he goes and finds a plaque that mentions about the origins of the way. And it mentions about the path to the bathing waters. As he starts to go down, he finds that there are creatures that have been living there as well, proof that the air is no longer toxic and that the robot is correct. Well, the robot has gone forward to try and scan things, and it is not bringing back any sort of sense that there's life forms out there. So these creatures have been living undetected, thus no probe droid would have been able to see them. And there is some level of toxicity in the air, but it's small enough that it's not anything that's going to kill anybody, but it's enough that it would have set off the sensors to any robots that would have come by beforehand without actually staying long enough to know if it was clean or not. So as they go down to the mines, he suddenly hears something outside. He turns around, exits, and he sees Bo-Katan's ship arriving. He says, "What are you doing here?" And she mentions, "I saw that your ship has entered the system again, and I knew where you were going." And he says, "Well, why have you come over here? Don't you believe this planet is cursed?" And she says, "You know I don't believe this planet is cursed. But something you said has stuck with me." And then we have a flashback to the previous scene. Well, not flashback. We just pull a line back from the previous scene, previous season, that addresses this religious journey that Din is on, and saying, if you're foolish enough to go down there alone, you obviously don't know about what the process of bathing in these waters is like. So they both go down. She shows them the way, and the whole time she's starting to see things around her. She's trying to be all stoic, but they pass by buildings where she starts to pause and looks at it, saying, "It's like I was here yesterday." And you see the ruin suddenly starting to come back to life, and you see a little Bo-Katan going about her daily life. And she says something along the lines of, "I had such hope back then. I wasn't cold to anyone, not our order, not to anyone, but hardship burned that out of me." And then you see the explosions off in the distance. And as they go deeper, she starts to say, "I can't do this." She's starting to have a religious journey as well. As she is going down, she cannot proceed forward because it is starting to eat at her. And she says, "You go on." And then Din takes an opportunity to say, "No, we are Mandalorians. We stand together. Let us go forward together. We'll take it slowly." And this gives them a chance to bond over it. They're both now on a religious journey. Din for redemption, Bo-Katan for redemption too, but of a different kind. They both get to the waters, and she starts to scoff it off, trying to show that she's above it all. But as she's carrying about doing the charade and the show that she used to do as a child with her family, she notices Din starting to proceed out into the waters, citing the creed. And she starts to have a flashback to her father, citing the creed as well, as Mandalorians went into the water. And she stops him and saying, "No, let me join you in this." And so they both proceed forward, pinging each other off with different words of the creed as they walk out into the water. And then they get up to the helmet level, and Din says, "Now what?" She says, "Now you wait." And then they start to feel themselves sink into the water. And as they start to submerge, they both have a vision of what they both need to do. It's not necessarily a vision that is any sort of magical or force-related thing. It's more like when they're in the waters, it's almost like their lives are flashing before their eyes, and they see something from their past that they latch onto. and they both come out of the water, both changed. Bo-Katan suddenly has compassion. Din has redemption. And they both have a different mission that's going to cause them to part ways. Bo-Katan's going to go back and meet with Mandalorians that she has cast aside. And Din's going to carry on his journey as well as he goes back to try and make amends with the armor and those Mandalorians that he was around. And then the episode ends. But just as they're getting ready, well, the episode's about to end, but just as they're getting ready to leave, he hears something. And he turns around and he sees Grogu walking out into the water. And not able to say the words of the creed, but trying his best to try and mutter those words. And thus, Grogu has become the first Mandalorian Jedi in their history since the one that wielded the Darksaber. That's how I would have approached this story. How about you, Roland Chairs? Is there anything you would have done differently?
I agree with you on many things, especially that ending. You did really well with it. Much of my changes would have been more. I haven't really thought about. With Grogu, you added much more to him than I did because, like Disney, for me, I honestly have been confused what they're gonna do with him, and I've been having trouble figuring out a path that they could go down for him. But I'm thinking more of characters like Bo that I have a connection with from the past. I really would have done her character differently. So from the beginning, I would have had them take the BD droid. So Bo-Katan comes with him right away instead of just staying on her castle away from near Mandalore. And she's just like, "Oh, you're going to Mandalore? Okay, I'll come with you." Like, she comes right away. So they don't even need this droid, astromech droid, to fly Grogu to her later on. They take the BD droid, which I obviously want, and I've said many times. And eventually that droid will be passed down to Grogu. And I think Mando would still get his assassin droid later on. But, so they go to Mandalore together originally. So there's a lot less repetition, you know. Mando says some stuff, and then Bo comes through and says the same thing. Instead of them saying it to Grogu, it'd be them talking about it together right from the start and dealing with everything right from the start. And I would have had a lot less action in this episode. I would have probably gotten rid of the trolls. Maybe they fight one troll, you know, to show that there is some form of life there and stuff like that. But the main thing that would have been going on is them going through Mandalore and reminiscing on what this place was. And Din is trying to understand it and learn more because he's never been there. And Bo is just overflooded with memories, emotions, everything. And we just see it from two different perspectives as they walk through, seeing just basic stuff like our form of apartments, stores, and then they get their way to the palace where much of the Clone Wars story takes place. And we just see her have a flashback to Darth Maul beating Vizsla for the Darksaber, where he claims it and claims rule over Mandalore. That would have been a huge flashback, but not many people would have understood it. Like, you probably would have been like, "Wait, what? Darth Maul was on Mandalore?" type of thing. Like, wait, Darth Maul lived after the prequels? I thought he died from Obi-Wan. I didn't know he lived on. Like, why is he here now? Like, people would be like, what the heck is going on? But as someone who's watched it, that's what I would have liked to see. And so instead of them fighting trolls and then having to go and get Bo, they go together, walk through Mandalore, and spend that time where they're fighting trolls, just taking in Mandalore, reminiscing, talking about everything. And Bo, this could be a huge moment where fans from who haven't seen Clone Wars could learn a lot about her. We see her talking about pretty much the fall of Mandalore, her relationship with her sister, like she's opening up with Mando, and just talking about everything. And like you said, she it gets to a point where she's struggling with it, and I would have had that moment in the throne room, where her sister died, where Darth Maul won the dark saber, just everything in that throne room. That's where she just has this moment where she just breaks down, and then just kind of lightly puts a hand on her back or shoulder, and is just like trying to comfort her. It's just person to person, just trying to help another person, and she kind of comes to terms with it. And by the time they get down to the mine, she's like, and kind of like what you said, she kind of saying that the living waters is gobbledygook, just a show for the, compared to her, the peasants of this world, who she thinks she's above almost, and they just did it almost as a show. But by the time she gets there, it's almost something where she's like, this is something I need to do. And then I really like what you said for the end, where they kind of both go down together. I think that would have been really interesting. And they both have their own visions, and Bo sees the mythosaur, and that's like a, because that's what they really wanted for the end, is for Bo to see the mythosaur. That's why she saved him, because that was a huge eye opener for her. And but there is a better way they could have made that happen, and I think the way you said it is where they go together instead of her just watching on. I think that could have been interesting, because I always thought she should go on. I kind of said that earlier, but I thought she would have been like doubting it for a few episodes, and then they go back and she does it herself while Din and Grogu are looking on her. I really like what you did with the ending part there. There's just so much I would have done in the beginning seasons differently from Disney. The whole droid thing, they should have just got rid of that and had them go together originally, and had them talking about Mandalore together. From it should have been a very dialogue heavy episode, where they tried to make it an action heavy episode. It was very disappointing, honestly. There were some great moments as well, but I would have really liked to see much more of Bo and Din just walking around Mandalore, and just taking in, talking about what could have been, stuff they don't know, just everything about this place that we didn't really go into this episode. I kind of just rabbled on for a bit, but
No, but those are good points there. I like them. Well, on that note, we're going to bring this one to a close. Thanks, everyone, for sticking with this as long as you have. We had quite a few folks come and go during this stream. Greetings, Jared Thorne. Thanks for coming by. Same to everyone else. For I Stole the One Ring, and Aaron in real life has shown up too. Ha as well. So we have quite a few folks that came by, and thanks very much for listening in on this. If you have ideas that you would like to add to this discussion, we'll be doing this again this weekend, and so look forward to that. And this one will be up to speed, and we will be discussing episode 3. And if you do enjoy this, please consider liking it and sharing it. This is now on YouTube, so sharing it is going to become a lot easier. And Grant, we turned a 20-minute episode into an almost a 3-hour discussion. So, but I think that for this one, it actually makes sense, because so much of this is based upon lore aspects that are far deeper than just 20 minutes. And so, thank you again, everyone, for participating and listening in. We're going to bring this one to a close. If you are on the Twitch side, we will be rating someone. I'm not entirely sure yet, but we will do that once the main stream comes to an end. So thank you again, and we will see you all next time.
thanks for having me on.
Absolutely glad to have you. And Rolling Chairs will be back with us the next time as well.